A 20-year-old college student steps out of a late-night party and disappears without a trace. What began as an ordinary summer night in Bloomington, Indiana, became a mystery that has haunted the town for 14 years. No body was ever found, no confession was made, no definitive truth emerged. Lauren Spierer vanished from the heart of a community long considered safe, leaving behind only questions, silence, and a case that refuses to fade. What truly happened in the final moments of that summer night? Was it a tragic accident followed by fear and silence? A deliberate cover-up? Or did someone lurking in the early morning darkness seize a sudden, fatal opportunity? The answers remain just out of reach. The night of June 3rd into June 4th, 2011, remains a shadow etched into the history of this small Midwestern town. And tonight, we step into that shadow slowly, carefully examining every known detail, every contradiction, and every silence that still echoes. Bloomington, Indiana, is the kind of town that feels carefully arranged around youth and optimism. Tree-lined streets, brick academic buildings, late-night diners glowing under soft streetlights. At its heart stands Indiana University, drawing thousands of students each year. It is a place parents trust, a place where independence is supposed to bloom safely under the watchful rhythm of campus life. By the summer of 2011, the academic year had ended. The air felt lighter. Students who had survived exams and deadlines spilled into apartments and bars, celebrating freedom before internships, travel, or the slow quiet of summer classes. Music drifted through open windows, laughter echoed down narrow sidewalks. It was the kind of night that felt routine, almost harmless. But college towns often carry a dual identity. In daylight, they are scholarly and structured. At night, especially in summer, they become looser, blurred at the edges. Alcohol flows freely, boundaries soften, people move in and out of apartments without much notice, and in that fluid environment, something can happen quickly and quietly. Lauren Spierer was 20 years old when she disappeared. She had just completed her sophomore year at Indiana University, studying apparel merchandising. Originally from Scarsdale, New York, she came from a supportive, close-knit family who described her as bright, independent, and determined. She was petite, barely over 4 feet, 11 inches tall, often recognizable for her long blonde hair and expressive blue eyes. Friends described Lauren as social and energetic. She loved fashion. She enjoyed going out, dancing, being part of the social fabric of campus life. She was not an outsider, drifting alone through college. She had a circle. She belonged. Yet beneath the surface, Lauren carried vulnerabilities that were not always visible in photographs. In the months before her disappearance, she had experienced a serious head injury after a fall. The injury resulted in a concussion and lingering health concerns. For someone small in stature, the physical risks of another fall or trauma were more significant. That detail would later become deeply important in how investigators and the public interpreted what might have happened. There were also quieter pressures, the kind common to many college students: academic expectations, social dynamics, the invisible competition to fit in, to appear effortless. Lauren's family later acknowledged that she had faced anxiety at times, nothing extreme, nothing that suggested she would willingly vanish, but enough to remind us she was human, navigating early adulthood like millions of others. On the night of June 3rd, 2011, Lauren went out with friends. Her boyfriend at the time, Jesse Wolfe, was not in Bloomington that evening. He attended another university and was out of town. By all accounts, their relationship was steady, though, like many college relationships, it carried the natural strain of distance. Jesse would later become one of the most publicly scrutinized figures in the case, not because of evidence tying him to wrongdoing, but because when someone disappears, those closest are inevitably examined first. More central to that night were several male students who interacted with Lauren in the final hours she was seen alive: Corey Rossman, Michael Beth, and Jay Rosenbaum. Corey Rossman had known Lauren socially. That night, witnesses reported that the two had been at Kilroy Sports Bar, a popular student hangout. Surveillance footage later showed Lauren leaving the bar around 2:30 a.m., appearing unsteady on her feet. At one point, she was seen falling and hitting her head on the sidewalk, given her prior head injury. That moment would raise alarm in hindsight. Corey reportedly assisted her after the fall. The two were later seen walking in the direction of her apartment building, Smallwood Plaza, located just a few blocks away. Somewhere along that short distance, a walk that should have taken minutes, clarity begins to dissolve. Michael Beth and Jay Rosenbaum were also present in the orbit of that evening. Lauren was last known to have been inside Rosenbaum's apartment in the early morning hours. According to public records, Rosenbaum later stated that he and Lauren had briefly interacted before she left alone. No direct evidence has ever led to charges against the young men connected to Lauren's final hours. Still, public suspicion intensified when each quickly hired an attorney and, on legal advice, declined certain police questions while limiting public comments. Legally, that is their constitutional right. But in the court of public opinion, it stirred unease. Their statements also contained small inconsistencies, subtle timeline shifts, and imperfect recollections. Individually minor, yet in a case built on absinthe, even small cracks feel amplified. Bloomington's downtown area, particularly near campus, was dense with student housing. Smallwood Plaza, where Lauren lived, was a modern apartment complex, catering to students. Security cameras existed in some areas, but coverage was limited. Blind spots were common. Summer nights meant open doors, unlocked entrances, people drifting between units. It was an environment designed for convenience, not scrutiny. The streets were active, but not chaotic. People walked home alone frequently. The assumption of safety was embedded into daily life. Yet that assumption relied on something fragile. Trust that nothing truly dangerous would interrupt the pattern. Underneath the music and celebration that June night were less visible elements. Alcohol consumption, possible drug use, exhaustion, impaired judgment. College culture often normalizes risk in subtle ways. Staying out until 4 a.m. feels ordinary. Walking home alone feels manageable. Trusting acquaintances feels safe enough. Only after something irreversible happens do your ordinary decisions come under unforgiving scrutiny. Lauren didn't vanish on a deserted road or deep in the wilderness. She disappeared just blocks from home, near familiar streets, student apartments, and the pulse of campus life. That is what shook Bloomington most. If someone could vanish there, in the heart of youth and activity, then safety was more fragile than anyone believed. On the surface, it was a normal summer night. Beneath it, something had already begun to break. The evening of June 3, 2011 began without warning. Lauren moved through the night. Like many college students do at the start of summer, she visited friends. She stopped at Kilroy's sports bar, a familiar gathering place. Witnesses later described her as drinking heavily. Some reports suggest that she may have taken additional substances, though exact details remain uncertain. What is clear is that by the early hours of the morning, she was severely intoxicated. Intoxication does not erase responsibility from others, but it does alter vulnerability. Around 2:30 a.m., surveillance footage captured Lauren leaving Kilroy's with Corey Rossman. She appeared unstable, leaning into him for balance. At one point during the walk toward her apartment building, she fell. The fall was not subtle. Her head struck the pavement. For someone with a recent history of head trauma, this moment should have raised immediate concern. Head injuries can compound. A second impact, especially combined with alcohol, can produce confusion, memory loss, nausea, impaired coordination. It can also mask symptoms that escalate quietly over hours. Witnesses describe Lauren as struggling to walk. She had reportedly lost her shoes at some point in the night. She no longer had her phone. These were not dramatic signs, but they were red flags. A young woman, barely 5 feet tall, intoxicated, barefoot, without communication, moving through a dimly lit downtown. These are the kinds of conditions that increase risk exponentially after reaching the Smallwood Plaza complex. Accounts diverge slightly. Corey Rossman later stated that he helped Lauren to her apartment building, but did not go inside her unit. Instead, she continued socializing elsewhere in the building. At some point, she entered the apartment of Jay Rosenbaum, another acquaintance. Inside that apartment, according to later statements, Lauren appeared heavily impaired. Rosenbaum reportedly said that she was incoherent at times, possibly sick, and that he allowed her to rest briefly. He later claimed he encouraged her to leave, because he had an early commitment the next morning. The timeline tightens around 4:30 a.m. Surveillance footage from outside the building shows Lauren walking barefoot down the sidewalk. She is wearing a white top and black pants. She is alone. She turns a corner in the direction of her own apartment, which was only a short distance away. It is the last confirmed image of her alive. The distance between Rosenbaum's apartment and Lauren's apartment was less than a block. A walk of minutes, a straight path, familiar, direct. And yet she never made it inside. No surveillance camera captured her entering her building. No resident reported seeing her in the hallway. No one reported hearing a disturbance. The silence that follows that 4:30 a.m. timestamp is not dramatic. It is empty. Morning arrived slowly. Friends began texting Lauren. There was no response. At first, the assumption may have been simple. She was sleeping off a long night. College schedules are fluid. Late mornings are common. But as hours passed, unease began to grow. Lauren missed planned commitments the next day. She failed to return calls. Her phone remained inactive. Her family, back in New York, became alarmed when they could not reach her. By the afternoon of June 4th, concern shifted from inconvenience to fear. A missing person report was filed. When law enforcement began speaking to those who had last seen her, a pattern emerged that would later generate intense scrutiny. The young men present that night retained attorneys relatively quickly. From a legal standpoint, that decision is rational. College students advised by family members or concerned parents often seek counsel when faced with serious police questioning. But psychologically, to outsiders, the speed of that decision felt defensive. It suggested awareness of potential liability. There was another, unsettling element. No one had called 911. Multiple witnesses had observed Lauren in a visibly impaired state. She had fallen and struck her head. She appeared disoriented. Yet there is no record of emergency services being contacted. No ambulance was summoned. No formal medical evaluation was sought. This absence does not prove intent. It may reflect immaturity, fear of disciplinary consequences, or normalization of heavy drinking in college culture. But it represents a critical decision point, a moment where intervention might have altered the trajectory of the night. Statements given by those present were largely consistent in broad strokes. Lauren was intoxicated. She moved between locations. She left on her own. Yet investigators later noted minor discrepancies in timing and description. Small inconsistencies are common in intoxicated environments. Memory degrades. Perception narrows. However, when a person vanishes, even small inconsistencies become magnified. One question remained constant. If she left alone at 4:30 a.m., what happened in the minutes that followed? Investigators reviewed surveillance footage from surrounding buildings and streets. Cameras were present, but coverage was far from complete. The area lacked the kind of seamless high-resolution monitoring common today. There were gaps, blind angles, uncovered corners, spaces between lenses. Most importantly, no camera recorded Lauren after she turned that corner. It was as if she stepped into a void. Within such a brief window, possibilities narrow, a familiar face, a stranger sensing vulnerability, a sudden medical crisis, or an accident that sparked fear and concealment. Each scenario requires human decision-making at a critical juncture. The absence of physical evidence is not neutral. It suggests deliberate concealment or extraordinary coincidence. Search efforts began almost immediately once the disappearance was confirmed. But the most fragile window, those first hours between 4:30 a.m. and sunrise, had already passed without structured response. If something occurred during that short walk, it was swift and silent within steps of crowded apartments. What unsettles investigators most isn't the darkness or alcohol, but the closeness. Lauren Spierer did not disappear in isolation. She vanished within a living, breathing campus community, and somewhere in those few unaccounted minutes lies a decision, a choice made by someone that has remained unspoken for 14 years. When Lauren Spierer was officially reported missing, the atmosphere in Bloomington shifted from confusion to urgency. What had begun as a silent absence became a public emergency. Law enforcement mobilized quickly, aware that the first 48 hours in any disappearance are critical. Officers canvassed the downtown area, knocking on doors, reviewing surveillance footage, retracing her last confirmed steps. Search dogs were deployed to track her scent from the location where she was last seen. Reports indicated that the dogs followed a trail for a short distance before losing it. That detail created immediate tension. A lost scent can mean many things. It can suggest contamination by heavy foot traffic. It can suggest entry into a vehicle, or it can simply reflect environmental disruption. Ground searches expanded outward. Teams combed wooded areas surrounding Bloomington. They searched nearby lakes, retention ponds, and fields. Divers examined bodies of water. Law enforcement investigated landfills, operating under the grim possibility that a body could have been concealed in waste disposal. Each effort yielded nothing conclusive. No clothing, no purse, no phone, no trace. Lauren's cell phone went silent in the early morning hours. Investigators analyzed tower data and digital records, but the signal revealed no clear location after her last confirmed movements. In 2011, tracking technology was limited, yet the silence felt unsettling. Her purse and keys were never found, further complicating the timeline. If she meant to go home, why leave without keys? And if she was taken, why did no one hear a struggle? Within weeks, quiet criticism of the initial investigation began to surface. Some questioned whether authorities acted swiftly enough in the critical early hours. Others suggested local police were overwhelmed by intense media attention and the challenge of interviewing intoxicated students with fragmented memories. In hindsight, early decisions are often scrutinized, yet detectives must work with limited time and evidence. As days passed without answers, the story spread nationally. Major networks covered Lauren's disappearance, portraying a promising student who vanished after a night out, a fear that resonated with parents everywhere. Lauren's family became the emotional core of the case. Her parents traveled again and again to Indiana, standing before cameras and pleading for answers. They spoke of their daughter not as a headline, but as a vibrant young woman with dreams and a contagious laugh. A large reward was offered and later increased to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Both hope and desperation intertwined. As media coverage grew, speculation exploded. Theories flooded online spaces, and in the absence of proof, rumor moved faster than fact. For the family, this period was uniquely painful. They had to absorb not only the uncertainty of Lauren's fate, but also public commentary dissecting her final night. Photographs of her intoxicated were circulated. Her choices were debated. Her character was analyzed by strangers. Subtle or explicit, began to surface in corners of the internet. That phenomenon reflects a psychological defense mechanism. When people distance themselves from a victim's behavior, they reassure themselves that tragedy is avoidable. It creates a false sense of control. Meanwhile, investigators continued to question those last known to be with her. Corey Rossman and Jay Rosenbaum received the most attention. They had been present in the final hours. They had interacted with Lauren while she was visibly impaired. They maintained that she left Rosenbaum's apartment alone. Around 4:30 a.m. neither man was charged with any crime directly related to her disappearance. Both cooperated to a limited extent but exercised their right to legal counsel. Their attorneys advised them not to participate in certain interviews or polygraph examinations. In the legal system, silence is not proof of guilt, but in the psychological theater of a missing person case, silence invites suspicion. Investigators reportedly examined phone records, vehicle data, and alibis. They searched residences connected to those involved. They looked for physical evidence of struggle or concealment. None was found that met prosecutorial standards. The absence of evidence led to a painful stalemate. Detectives expanded their focus, considering stranger involvement, reviewing known offenders, and checking for links to other crimes across Indiana. Nothing definitive emerged. As time passed, urgency gave way to periodic case reviews. Anniversaries brought renewed media attention. Interviews were revisited, and digital data re-examined with updated tools. Yet no breakthrough followed. The case gradually shifted from active investigation to cold case, not abandoned, but suspended, waiting for new leads or technology. For Lauren's family, the passage of time did not dilute the absence. Birthdays passed, holidays accumulated without closure. The psychological strain of ambiguous loss, the state of not knowing whether someone is alive or dead, is uniquely corrosive. It prevents mourning from completing its cycle. In law enforcement, unresolved cases carry their own weight. Detectives retire. New investigators inherit files. Institutional memory fades. Details that once felt vivid become lines in a report. By the 10th anniversary of Lauren's disappearance, there had been no breakthrough, no remains discovered, no confession, no definitive theory confirmed. The case had not grown cold because it lacked attention. It had grown cold because it lacked proof. And that distinction matters, because somewhere between 4:30 a.m. and sunrise on June 4, 2011, something irreversible occurred. That event did not leave behind the kind of evidence that easily survives time. It did not erupt in public view. It did not produce witnesses willing or able to step forward with certainty. Instead, it left silence. Silence in the surveillance footage, silence in the phone records, silence in statements that stopped just short of certainty. 14 years later, the search endures in quieter ways through database checks, periodic case reviews, and the lingering weight carried by those present. That night, the central question remains unchanged. How did Lauren vanish within a few unrecorded minutes in the heart of a town that believed it was safe? To understand what may have happened in the final hours before Lauren Spierer vanished, investigators and analysts often look beneath the surface, beyond timelines and surveillance clips, into the quieter layers of personal history, behavior, patterns, and vulnerability. Lauren was not a mystery in her daily life. She was social, energetic, and deeply immersed in college culture. Friends described her as someone who enjoyed being part of the moment. She liked gatherings, late nights, music, and the shared rituals of student life. In a college town like Bloomington, that environment was not unusual. It was expected, but beneath that outward normalcy were details that matter. Prior to her disappearance, Lauren had reportedly experienced a head injury. A brain injury, even one that appears resolved, can increase sensitivity to alcohol and other substances. It can alter reaction times, judgment, balance, and neurological stability. When combined with heavy drinking or certain medications, the effects can be amplified in unpredictable ways. This detail introduced a troubling layer to the case. The combination of alcohol and prescription medication, especially in someone with a prior brain injury, can lead to confusion, impaired coordination, slowed breathing, or sudden collapse. It can also create memory gaps in both the individual and those around them, complicating witness accounts. Lauren's final night involved alcohol consumption. Reports and witness statements suggested she appeared heavily intoxicated at various points. She stumbled. She fell. She needed assistance walking. Surveillance footage captured moments of imbalance. Friends helped her up. That vulnerability is critical. College environments often normalize intoxication, but normalization does not eliminate risk. A person who is visibly impaired is at increased danger, whether from accidental injury, medical crisis, or exploitation by others. There were behavioral details from that night that, when viewed together, suggest instability. At some point, Lauren reportedly lost her phone. Whether it fell, was misplaced, or was left behind remains unclear. Losing a phone in 2011 did not carry the same implications as it might today, but it still removed her primary means of communication and navigation. She was also not carrying her keys when she was last seen. That fact raises practical questions. If she intended to return to her apartment, how did she plan to enter? Was she relying on someone else? Was she thinking clearly enough to consider it? Or was she operating moment to moment, without long-term awareness? Witnesses stated she left an apartment alone around 4:30 a.m. She was described as intending to walk a short distance home, only a few blocks. Under normal conditions, that would not be alarming. But she was not in normal condition, walking alone at that hour, while heavily intoxicated, without a phone, without keys. These are not signs of someone fully in control of their environment. They are signs of exposure. Yet exposure does not automatically mean foul play. When examining her broader psychological profile, there were no indications that Lauren intended to disappear. She had made future plans. She was enrolled in school. She maintained close contact with her family. There were no reported financial crises, no documented severe conflict with parents or friends, no evidence of preparations for a voluntary departure. Runaway scenarios typically leave subtle traces: cash withdrawals, packed belongings, digital searches, fair purchases. None of these surfaced in a way that supported intentional disappearance. Her personality, as described by those who knew her, reflected sociability rather than withdrawal. She wanted connection, not escape. Some observers have attempted to link risk-taking behavior with intent, but social risk-taking in a party environment does not equate to a desire to abandon one's life. It reflects youth, context, and sometimes misjudgment, not necessarily despair. Then there are the physical unknowns. Despite extensive searches, no confirmed signs of violence were found. No blood. No screams reported. No forced entry. No visible struggle along her likely route. In many violent disappearances, something is left behind. Torn fabric, disturbed ground, a suspicious vehicle. Here, nothing was publicly confirmed. That absence points in two directions: a hidden medical emergency followed by concealment, or a brief encounter executed so quickly and quietly that it left almost no trace. Opportunistic crimes often rely on isolation and speed. They do not always generate noise or visible chaos, but speculation must be handled carefully. Without evidence, theories remain theories. What makes Lauren's case particularly haunting is the completeness of the disappearance. Not partial, not fragmented, complete. No phone recovered, no remains discovered, no verified sightings after the final moment. It is as if the narrative simply stopped mid-sentence. Psychologically, ambiguity is often harder to endure than tragedy. A confirmed death, though heartbreaking, allows mourning to begin. Uncertainty leaves families suspended between hope and grief. Over the years, investigators have revisited multiple angles: a possible overdose hidden by panic, stranger abduction, and the reliability of intoxicated witnesses. Each path leads back to doubt. Group dynamics further complicate memory. During chaotic, alcohol-fueled nights, recollections fragment, timelines blur, and self-protective instincts quietly shape what people believe they remember. But memory distortion alone is not evidence of guilt. It is a common human reaction to stress and intoxication. The twist in this case is not a dramatic revelation, but the absence of one. No forensic breakthrough, no late confession, no remains found, no DNA linking her to a known offender. Just an empty space where answers should be. Some cases overwhelm with evidence, others simply dissolve. Lauren's disappearance left no measurable violence, only a silence that defies interpretation. Because when a person can vanish from a lit, populated college town within walking distance of home, without leaving a trace strong enough to solve the mystery for more than a decade, it forces a difficult realization: safety can be an illusion. And sometimes, the most disturbing cases are not the ones filled with blood or noise, they are the ones defined by absence. When a case remains unsolved for over a decade, it naturally gives rise to competing theories. Without definitive evidence, investigators and the public piece together narratives from limited facts. Each explanation appears plausible in parts, yet each contains gaps. None is proven strong enough to bring true closure. Theory, a personal motive from someone. One of the earliest and most persistent theories suggests that someone within Lauren's immediate circle may have been involved, not necessarily with malicious intent at first, but through panic after something went wrong. The hypothesis proposes that an accident occurred inside an apartment, a fall, a medical crisis, a sudden unresponsiveness, those present fearing legal consequences, reputational damage, or criminal charges related to alcohol or drugs, chose concealment over emergency assistance. The last confirmed individuals to see Lauren alive were members of her social group. They were physically present during the final hours of her known timeline. Some retained legal counsel early in the investigation, a move that, while legally prudent, fueled public suspicion. From a psychological standpoint, panic can drive irrational decisions. Young adults confronted with a sudden death, especially in a context involving alcohol or substances, may fear immediate blame. In such a scenario, self-preservation can override moral clarity. Group dynamics can also amplify poor decisions. When responsibility diffuses across several people, individuals sometimes act in ways they would not alone. No physical evidence has surfaced linking any of them to violence or concealment. No confirmed forensic trace suggests a body was removed from any apartment. Concealing a body successfully for 14 years, without leaks, mistakes, or discoveries, would require sustained coordination and extraordinary discipline. Silence can raise suspicion, but silence alone is not proof. Theory B, accident, turned into a cover-up. Closely related, but slightly broader, is the theory that Lauren may have died accidentally due to alcohol poisoning, head trauma from a fall, or a dangerous interaction between alcohol and medication, and that those nearby attempted to hide what happened. This theory centers less on personal motive and more on unintended tragedy, followed by fear-driven concealment. Witnesses described Lauren as heavily intoxicated. She reportedly fell multiple times that night. She had a prior brain injury, which could increase vulnerability to alcohol-related complications, medically speaking. A combination of high intoxication and neurological sensitivity can lead to rapid deterioration. A person may appear merely drunk, then suddenly lose consciousness. If those around her underestimated the severity of her condition, time could have been lost. Fear of criminal charges related to drug distribution, underage drinking, or negligence might have influenced poor decisions in the immediate aftermath. Successfully hiding a body long-term without discovery is extremely difficult. No landfill searches, property searches, or environmental scans have produced remains. Over time, secrets tend to fracture, especially among multiple participants. 14 years is a long time to maintain absolute silence. Human behavior often cracks under prolonged pressure. Yet no verified confession or credible insider account has emerged. Theory sees stranger abductionator. Possibility shifts the focus away from friends entirely. In this scenario, Lauren leaves the apartment alone around 4:30 a.m., disoriented and impaired. While walking the short distance home, she encounters an opportunistic predator. The encounter is brief, quiet, and decisive. She was alone, intoxicated, and without her phone. The early morning hours create reduced visibility and fewer witnesses. College towns contain transient populations, visitors, contractors, drivers passing through. Crimes of opportunity often rely on vulnerability and speed. A vehicle slows, a brief interaction occurs, a door opens. Within seconds, a person can vanish without dramatic noise. This theory also explains the absence of conflict within a friend group. If she truly left alone, then responsibility may lie beyond her social circle. No surveillance footage has publicly confirmed a suspicious vehicle. The window of time between her departure and potential arrival home was extremely short. No confirmed pattern of similar abductions in that immediate area has been directly linked. Stranger abductions are statistically less common than crimes involving acquaintances. While possible, they require a precise alignment of timing and isolation. Theory D. Someone unexpected from a wider circular, subtler hypothesis. Proposes involvement by someone not heavily scrutinized, a casual acquaintance, distant friend, or individual who moved on quickly and avoided suspicion. In this scenario, Lauren may have accepted assistance from someone she recognized. Familiarity lowers defenses. Trust reduces resistance. Victims are more likely to approach or accept help from someone they know, even casually. A known individual would not raise immediate alarm. Investigative focus may have initially centered too narrowly on those last confirmed present. If the responsible party was socially peripheral, not central to the main group that night, they may have escaped the early intensity of scrutiny. No concrete evidence points to a specific overlooked individual. Law enforcement reportedly interviewed numerous people connected to her life, without physical or digital trace. The theory remains abstract. This hypothesis thrives on possibility but lacks anchoring detail. Among the competing explanations, the accident-turned cover-up theory is often debated most intensely. It reflects Lauren's visible impairment, her medical vulnerability, and the uneasy details surrounding those last known to be with her. Yet the popularity of a theory does not strengthen its proof. Every scenario faces the same barrier: a complete absence of definitive evidence. No forensic confirmation, no body, no confession, no verified eyewitness to the decisive moment. What remains is a puzzle, with its central piece missing a narrative that refuses to lock into place. The human mind craves closure, a clean alignment between cause and consequence, but some cases resist structure. If you were reopening this investigation today, where would you focus? Re-examine the inner circle, revisit stranger databases, reassess medical possibilities with modern tools. 14 years later, the theories persist, but the truth has yet to emerge. In unresolved cases, the loudest presence is often not evidence but silence. In interviews, in data that ends too abruptly, in memories that fade just before clarity. Over time, that silence grows heavier than any confirmed fact, settling into the spaces where certainty should exist. It lingers in unanswered calls and fractured timelines, reshaping how people remember and grieve. In the absence of resolution, silence becomes its own force, patient, immovable. and resistant to explanation. To understand its weight, we have to look beyond crime scenes and into human behavior. When something sudden and catastrophic happens, in a group setting, logic does not always lead. Panic distorts perception. Memory fractures under stress. Responsibility becomes unclear, passed invisibly from one person to another. Psychologists describe a phenomenon known as collective panic. In high-stress moments, especially those shadowed by fear of consequences, groups can make decisions that none of the individuals would have made alone. The instinct to avoid blame can overpower the instinct to protect. The silence can begin not as malice, but as hesitation. Closely related is the bystander effect. When several people witness a crisis, each may assume someone else will act. Responsibility diffuses action stalls. Seconds feel elastic. In environments involving alcohol, this effect intensifies. Perception blurs. Doubt creeps in. Is this serious? Is she just sleeping? Am I overreacting? Those questions can delay intervention just long enough to alter outcomes. Minutes pass, and sometimes minutes are everything. There is also the subtle force of self-preservation. When people fear legal, social, or academic consequences, the mind shifts into defense, and cognitive dissonance quietly reshapes perception. Events are reframed to ease personal responsibility. Memory does not necessarily lie, but adapts into something more survivable. Under stress or intoxication, recollections fragment and timelines blur, and over time, reconstructed memories can feel more real than the original moment itself. The most unsettling possibility is not always violent intent. It may be that something irreversible occurred and confusion and fear dictated what happened next. And once silence begins, it gains momentum. Each year that passes makes breaking it harder. Silence compounds. The longer it endures, the heavier. The consequences of shattering it become relationships, reputations. Entire adult lives may feel built upon that quiet. To speak would not simply reveal truth. It would dismantle stability. Beyond psychology lies a deeper question. What does silence do to the conscience? In Buddhist philosophy, suffering arises from ignorance and attachment to identity, to image, to self-preservation. If harm occurs and individuals cling to ego or fear, suffering multiplies. Silence becomes an extension of attachment. It protects the self, while prolonging pain elsewhere. Christian theology speaks of unconfessed wrongdoing as a burden carried within the soul. Guilt unspoken does not dissolve. It settles, shaping thoughts and sleep. Truth deferred does not disappear. It lingers, pressing quietly against the conscience. Western philosophers echo similar themes, from Plato's allegories to Kierkegaard's reflections on inward truth. The idea persists. Reality cannot be erased by avoidance. Suppression may delay reckoning, but it does not cancel it. Truth postponed remains truth. If someone, somewhere, knows something, whether through action, inaction, or partial awareness, then silence is not empty. It is active. It shapes decisions. It shapes anniversaries. It shapes the way a person looks at their own reflection. The haunting element of unresolved cases is not only the absence of answers, it is the possibility that answers exist, sealed within memory, guarded by fear or loyalty. That possibility unsettles more deeply than confirmed tragedy. And yet, silence is not impenetrable. Technology evolves. Modern forensic science can recover what once seemed lost. DNA analysis has grown more precise, capable of extracting profiles from microscopic traces. Evidence preserved years ago can speak differently under new methods. Digital footprints, too, can resurface. Historical cell tower mapping, metadata reconstruction, archived communications, all can be re-examined with sharper tools. Cold cases have been solved not because the past changed, but because the lens improved. But technology is only one variable. The most unpredictable factor remains human conscience. People change, friendships dissolve, loyalties weaken, time alters perspective. What someone could not admit at 22 may become unbearable at 36. Guilt matures, fear softens, silence, once protective, can become suffocating. Some cold cases break not through laboratory breakthroughs, but through a decision, a single person choosing to speak. In violent crimes, fear often centers on the idea of an external predator, but in ambiguous cases, another fear emerges, What if the most powerful force is not brutality, but restraint? Silence that shields, silence that protects, silence that delays. If no physical evidence confirms violence, if no forensic trace proves a struggle, if no definitive sign of abduction exists, then what remains is the possibility of hidden knowledge, and that possibility carries its own gravity. Crimes, once exposed, can be prosecuted. Accidents, once acknowledged, can be mourned. But silence suspends everyone in between. Families cannot fully grieve. Communities cannot fully heal. Those who were present cannot fully escape the shadow of speculation. 14 years later, the question persists not only in police files, but in private thoughts. Is the most frightening reality that a terrible act occurred, or that someone knows something essential and has chosen not to say it? History suggests that truth has a peculiar endurance. It may surface slowly, it may arrive fragmented, it may emerge through science, confession, or coincidence. But silence, however disciplined, is rarely permanent, and sometimes, in the stillness of an unresolved case, the loudest sound is not a scream, it is the quiet refusal to speak. 14 years have passed. No grave, no confession, only a family still waiting for a call that has never come. Lauren Spierer became more than a missing person case. She became a symbol of how an ordinary night can fracture into something irreversible. A walk of just a few blocks, a town that felt safe, a timeline measured in minutes, and then nothing. This case reminds us that truth does not always rise on its own. Sometimes it is buried beneath fear, beneath loyalty, beneath the quiet calculations people make in moments of panic. Time moves forward, but unanswered questions remain suspended, untouched by years. If you have thoughts or theories, share them respectfully below. And don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe so we can continue exploring the mysteries that refuse to fade. Some crimes leave no screams, only questions, and some silences echo louder than any confession. Thank you for listening to Criminal Minds.